to the Cinnabar. Now today we're going to take a look at what I think is a very interesting little 22 boys rifle, part of the Cinnabar Ranch collection here, belonged to one of our family members. This one is a Hamilton rifle, this in particular a model 27. Now they made 14 different models, but this was by far the most popular. And you may not have heard of the Hamilton rifles before, but they were extremely popular in their time. Just this one model alone, it's estimated that there were over 500,000 of them produced. But very few of them survive today. You see, these were a very, very inexpensively made and sold item. And for the most part, they just got used up. They were almost like a throwaway gun. If you had an issue with them, instead of fixing it, you just tossed it. You see, these things at the time cost about $3. And they were produced from 1898 to about the start of World War II, when the company shifted production for the war effort into other items. But others at that time, other boys' rifles comparable, were $10 or more. So of course these were a very, very low cost item. Now Clarence Hamilton, who started the company, was already into manufacturing. He manufactured windmills, he manufactured some air rifles, and shortly before his death he started manufacturing these really inexpensive little 22s. After his death, his son sold off the windmill company. He sold off the air rifle company, which interestingly enough became kind of a household name. Here's an early example of one, of a Daisy air rifle. That's this Hamilton family actually started the Daisy air rifle company, which of course is still going strong today and very, very popular. But these guns were used as a promotion. Say if you bought one of their windmill kits, and of course around here where electricity didn't get out here for a long time, a lot of windmills were still in operation until fairly recently, even here on the ranch. But if you bought one of their windmills, you got a 22 rifle in the mix, and that may be how our ancestor came up with this one. Also, they were used as promotional items for kids that were selling door to door. So if you hit your mark for how many sales you got, and you got a $3 rifle. They actually put them in feed sacks for certain brands of animal feed. If you were lucky enough, you opened your feed sack from, say, to feed your chickens, and there was a 22. And of course that may be how this one came to the family as well. Now, because they had a lot of experience with sheet metal, these guns are basically made of sheet metal. Everything about them, the receiver, got a steel butt plate. Some of them didn't even have a butt plate. Even the barrels are a very interesting design and have a sheet metal wrap around them. So, you know, very, very inexpensively made, a kind of a birch stock, although they had a little higher end version of this that had a black walnut stock, but they didn't make a whole heck of a lot of those. So really it's a rifle that was produced in great numbers, but few of them survive today, and not very well known today. Now this one, our family member Herbert, when he passed away at the age of 8 years old from scarlet fever in 1924, the gun just got put away. So it's still in really nice condition. And of the few of these that remain, most of them are really used up. And so this one is one of the nicer examples that we've ever seen of a Hamilton rifle. Let's take a little closer look at it. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of blue on this, and as I mentioned, there's not a lot of them with condition, so this is a really nice example. Now, the only issue this one really has is you can see the replacement bolt through this screw that would have held the buttstock on. That's very common on surviving models. I think probably that screw got stripped pretty easily in the sheet metal. So we can see here, we've just got sheet metal making up the receiver here. There's two pieces that are basically screwed together here. Trigger guard is a piece of sheet metal. Even the hammer is just basically a thick piece of sheet metal. And then this barrel actually has a liner in it of, most people call them brass, but I believe they're actually bronze or gunmetal, which was used extensively in gun making. In fact, it's what was used in the receivers on the Henrys and the 1866 Winchesters. And they actually just took some tubing around a mandrel and formed the rifling in that mandrel had the ghost impression of the rifling, and in a process very similar to what we see today in hammer forged barrels, made those brass barrel liners. And then we've got just a piece of sheet metal that goes around the barrel here, and if you can see it, there's a seam right here that looks a lot like what we see on magazine tubes on early rifles. Now this one's a break open action. There's just a little lever here. You pull it up and it breaks open, a lot like some of the single shot shotguns of the time. Has a little extractor here that works. Just a very, very simplistic design, and I'm not going to take it apart to look at the, how the sear and hammer interact or anything, but I suspect it's a very simple design as well. The rear sight is kind of interesting. It's just got a fixed blade front sight here. It's just a little piece of sheet metal that's attached to that sleeve over the barrel, but the rear sight actually is windage adjustable. The front of it has a little hook down through a hole in that sheet metal sleeve, and then we can loosen up this screw on the back and move the back of that sight back and forth to give us some windage adjustment, which is kind of a cool feature for a little rifle like this. Okay, I mentioned just what an interesting way they made these barrels. And you can see there's a very thin piece of brass or bronze that was formed on that mandrel to put the rifling in. And basically it looks like it was just a piece of tubing that they then formed on that mandrel. And then there's another thick layer of another type of metal here. And I don't think it's steel. It's not heavy enough. So I think it's probably just some kind of cheap pot metal. And then on the outside we can see that there is a piece of steel sheet metal formed around it, and you can see if you look closely on top. Now the gun's upside down, the barrel's upside down here, but here's the seam where that sheet metal comes together. So we've got 3 layers of metal forming these barrels. Now, as one might expect, a barrel made in this way with these materials isn't going to take a whole bunch of rounds before the rifling starts going away. And it's not going to take a whole bunch of pressure from like modern high velocity 22 rounds. So, even this one that appears to have not been shot very much because the family just put it away after Herbert passed away. The rifling's all there, but it's pretty rounded over. My suggestion is that if you just have to shoot one of these, get something like a 22 short CB or even a BB cap, a real low velocity, low pressure round. Now they'll chamber a 22 long and a 22 long rifle, but I wouldn't suggest shooting any of those through them. Now, of course, you've probably guessed that we're going to have to take this up on the hill and shoot it. And I've got some 22 short CBs that we're going to shoot through it and just see how she shoots. We're pretty sure this hasn't been shot in at least 101 years since Herbert passed away. So it'll be an experience. Now, another feature of these Hamilton rifles is that they have a 15-inch barrel. And of course, that became an issue after the passage of the National Firearms Act in 1934, which made these short-barreled rifles illegal to own. But in an instance of unusual common sense, the federal government actually later on exempted them, or actually added them onto the CNR list, all Hamilton rifles. So you didn't have to individually go through and get them onto the CNR list. Now, hopefully, soon we'll we'll be done with all that silliness. But until then, if we have, say, short-barreled trapper version centerfire lever actions, we still have to send them off to ATF and go through this whole process to get them onto the CNR list. And fortunately, we don't have to do that with these Hamilton rifles. They've all been placed there. All right, what a beautiful day to be set up here doing some shooting. It's late November and it must be 60 degrees out here, no wind, just about as good as it gets in this time of year. And we've got our 22 short CBs marked for pest control. And you can kind of imagine, kids taking this kind of a rifle out and shooting barn rats. That's kind of what it conjures in my imagination. So we're set up at 15-20 yards here, which is probably a long-range shot in the barn. And we're going to just see how this old girl shoots. Now, first thing we do, we're going to put this thing in half cock, because this kind of an action, of course, if we leave the hammer down, it's going to have that firing pin forward. We put one in, close the action, and we risk the chance of it going off unexpectedly. All right. Now, my experience with these little light guns is they're really hard to hold on. This thing's, I don't know, 2.5, 3 pounds and really short. But we're just going to see how well we can shoot at this distance. Okay, there's number one. All right. Okay, there's number two, half cock. All right, 3 down, 2 to go. Okay, like everything around here, every bank here has rock on it, and we're getting that one, at least we had a little bit of a ricochet, although there's nothing beyond that hill if it went up and over, and of course it wouldn't go very far if it did. All right, last one. Let's see if we've got any kind of group at all here. Okay, let's go see how we did. So I must say I'm actually kind of impressed. Of the 5 shots, 4 of them hit right in here. You can see 1, 2, 3, and actually there's 2 of them right next to each other here. So we've got 4 of them in about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. And then of course we had one flyer that ironically hit almost dead center bullseye over here. So certainly a better degree of accuracy than what I would have expected for that particular little rifle. Well, there you have it. Minute of barn rat accuracy out of a $3 boy's rifle. It just doesn't get much better than that. Well, thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Until next time, happy trails from the Cinnabar.